I'll say, start the Morenu Shiur right now. We'll start with saying that our tefillot and our tefillot and our Torot were not mitkabel, at least as far as wait, I want to get this right. At least as far as Moshe Yaakov ben Shmuel Mordechai was concerned. He did not make it. He passed away the next day after last week's year. So instead, last week we had the Shiur L'Refuato. This time we'll have it Leilu Nishmato. And also Leilu Nishmat, Mr. Sir Naim Dangur, our sponsor for the evening. Beseder. So we saw the Rambam's phrasing of the mitzvah of Adlakat Nerot is in these two halachot. We saw it earlier, but I'm at the top of page 9 in the Hebrew pages at least. The Rambam writes, "Echad anashim ve'echad nashim chayavim liyot bevatehen ner deluk b'Shabbat." Right? They need to have a candle that is lit. Right? Same goes over here in Perek Lamed, which discusses at length all the Perkei discusses Hadlakat Nerot. Perek Lamed discusses kavod Shabbat, right? Preparing for Shabbat. And I think this is striking. The tzarich letaken beito, so someone needs to do that actively. The yener daluk is a passive thing, right? The candle will be lit. There will be a lit candle, right? So in the Rambam, it seems very, very clear that the issue is the light being there, not necessarily my act of lighting, right? Tomorrow night, Hanukkah, right? Yaakov pointed out, I already made one comparison to Hanukkah this evening. I'll make the next one of Hadlaka Samitzvah, Hanacha Samitzvah, meaning do we need to have the candles out there or do we need to do the act of lighting? We say that you need to do the act of lighting. A bunch of coming into that. But on Shabbat, it seems, at least according to the Rambam, there's no issue of the act of actively lighting. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is that there will be a lit candle, right? Candle is sufficient light, obviously, as we said, but it's not the act isn't the mitzvah. It's the outcome that's important. Now, Tosfot have a very interesting discussion regarding the bracha. Should you make a bracha? So Tosfot say the following. אומר טעם אחר לא לברך, משום שאם הייתה מודלקת ועומדת, לא היה צריך לכבותה ולחזור להדליקה, ולא להדליק אחרת. So he says like this, do you make a bracha? The Tosfot's question is, do you make a bracha on Shabbos candles at all? Is this just part of preparing for Shabbat? And therefore, it's true, there's a separate and specific takana to light the candles, but does that justify making a bracha on that mitzvah, or is it just part of Vod Shabbat? And part of Vod Shabbat, it doesn't justify its separate mitzvah, right? When we cut the challah on Shabbos, we don't make another bracha of le'aneg et Shabbat or lechabed et Shabbat belechem mishneh, right? There's a Hasidish minhag to say a nusach that regards the lechem mishneh, but it's a nusach. It's more of a yiratzon kind of thing. It's more of a but it's not a bracha, right? We just say Moshe Lechem Da'aretz, and we understand we are holding Lechem Mishneh, or maybe we can even say Nusach that emphasizes that we're doing the Lechem Mishneh for Kavod Shabbat or Neg Shabbat. There's no bracha for that. Why should candlelighting be different? So it could be candlelighting has its own takana. So Tosafot discussed this question of, do we make a bracha on candlelighting at all? So they say, how do I know you don't need to make a bracha? Because there's no need to actually light the candles. The point is the outcome. The point is the candles will be lit. Now, it's true that if you're living in a poor society in which you don't want to waste your wax and you don't want to waste your oil, so you light candles near evening. You're not going to light your candles in the middle of the day because it's a waste of money. But if you happen to be in a richer household, or it's a cloudy day, so you light earlier, there's no need to put the candles out. You're yotzei the mitzvah without doing anything. That's their taina over here. As the Tosfot say over here. Tosfot say, "Ve'nire da gabe kisui adam im kisa uruach patur mechasato. Afilu achi kshemechasat tzarich levarech." So, when we shecht an animal or poultry, we need to cover it with dirt or soil. Now, and there's a bracha for that. There's a specific bracha al kisui adam, and if it happens to get covered on its own, you don't need to cover it. But if you do, you don't need to uncover it and cover it. You don't have to actively look for that mitzvah, and yet there's a bracha for it. Now, what's interesting about this, Tosfot isn't rejecting the assumption that you don't need to put the candle out and then light it again. Tosfot isn't rejecting that aspect. He's rejecting the inference that if you don't need to redo the mitzvah, it means there's no bracha, right? Tosfot here assumed that there are two kinds of mitzvot, right? In the first paragraph, Tosfot assumed there are two kinds of mitzvot. There are mitzvot in which you need the outcome, and there are mitzvot in which you need to do the action. And you only make bracha on things that require the action. He says, since candle lighting is a mitzvah that's focused on the outcome and not on the action, mimela, there's no bracha. So, what interests us more, the main thing that interests us here is the first point, which is candle lighting is a mitzvah that requires an outcome, not an action. Now, when Tosfot reject this over here, when Tosfot question this, the question is not, wait, how can you say that candle lighting is the mitzvah? You have to do the act of candle lighting. Tosfot says, there's no such rule that you only make a bracha on mitzvot that require an action. Hooray, we see that Kisui Adam, the mitzvah, is in the outcome, right? Same goes for the next raya, which is a more interesting one on many levels. I'm not going to go deeply into that, but there's a lot to say about this. And also about the comparison between Kisui Adam and Brit Milah. There's a lot of Torah on that, but not going to get deeply into that right now. V'chen nolad mahul, ikaman damar she'en tzar latif mimeno dam brit. Ukshema al tanya b'shilei perek Rabbi Elazar d'Milah, hamal omer v'chulei. Meaning, is there bracha on the Brit Milah? Well, of course there's bracha on the Brit Milah. We've all been at the Brit Milah, I'm assuming, and we've seen there's a bracha. Why do you make a bracha if the mitzvah is a mitzvah in the outcome? Now, this is an interesting assumption. There's a machloket. Even if a baby is born without an orla, still we do a hatafat dam brit. We still just make some. We cause a bleeding for the brit aspect. And the question is that doraita or not? This is a machloket. It's a complicated machloket in itself. But the assumption is, if he's born mahul, and according to those poskim who say that the hatafat dam brit, that the bleeding is only drabanan, that means that the mitzvah of brit milah is a mitzvah in the outcome. Right? What interests us is the outcome of the baby not having an orla. So Tosfot saying like this. Just to recap, because there's a bit of a complicated uni point, right? Tosfot here say, I see that candle lighting, the mitzvah of candle lighting is a mitzvah in the outcome. I need the candles to be lit. For example, if I have sufficient lighting in my home, I'm not going to light new candles. There's no need for that. Therefore, there's no bracha, because we only make a bracha on mitzvot that require a specific action. If we're only interested in the outcome, there's no bracha. Tosfot say, I have two rayas, this isn't true. Number one, Kisui Adam. Number two, Brit Milah. Kisui Adam, we see that if the blood is covered already, you don't need to do anything. And Brit Milah, we see that at least midoraita, according to many poskim, according to some of the Amorim, some of the poskim, it's a complicated sugya, but Tosfot makes this assumption. We're not going to go deeply into that right now, as I said. There's no mitzvah of actually doing the action. The mitzvah is to have the outcome of not having an orla, and yet both of these have a bracha. So we see that Tosfot's rule is wrong. So you should make a bracha on candle lighting, despite the fact that it's a mitzvah in the outcome. True, if you already have sufficient light, you don't need to do anything, and then you won't make a bracha. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that if I'm doing the action for candle lighting for Shabbos, I won't make a bracha. But what's interesting is that all throughout this point, Tosfot doesn't reject the notion that the mitzvah of candle lighting is a mitzvah that requires an outcome, not an action. And then comes Rabbeinu Tam. עוד נראה לרבנו תם שאם הנר מודלק ועומד שצריך לכבות ולחזור ולהדליק. כדאמר להם סבו ובלבד שלא יקדים ובלבד שלא יאחר. So, once again, we're going to mention Hanukkah for a third time in one moment. The Gemara in Shabbat, Kaf Gimel, I think, if I remember correctly, quotes Hahus Saba, who says you need to light on time. Lo yakdim v'lo ya'achel. So Rabbeinu Tam says you see that candlelight, lighting the Shabbos candle has to be done at a specific time. Well, you can't do it too late because then it's Shabbos already, and you can't do it too early either. Why not? Why can't I light my Shabbos candles noon on Friday? Why not? We see that that part of the takana of candle lighting is to do the specific action of lighting on time. If the mitzvah is only to have an outcome, so there's no such thing as time. What time? You need the candles to be lit over Shabbat, according to the Rambam, right? The Rambam says you need to have a lit candle on Shabbat, right? At what time? Throughout the evening. Well, you're not going to light in the evening, but right, the Rambam says throughout the evening, obviously. There's no relevance to the time notion unless we say there's a mitzvah in the action itself. And therefore, Rabbeinu Tam says the mitzvah includes not only the outcome of having lit candles, but also the action of lighting on time. And the important thing to us at the moment is lighting. The mitzvah of lighting is part of the mitzvah. It's not only the outcome. So, to sum that up, the Rambam said that the mitzvah is to have a lit candle. The candles have to be lit. Tosfot, until Rabbeinu Tam, Tosfot assumed that the mitzvah is the outcome. And says, and therefore there's no bracha, but that's another issue. Then Tosfot argued, the Baalat Tosafot argued, do you make a bracha on mitzvot that only require the outcome and not the action? That's a machloket here. But everyone agrees that the candle lighting is a mitzvah that requires an outcome, not an action. Until came Rabbeinu Tam and said, no, you're wrong, because the Gemara says you have to light at a specific time. If you have to light at a specific time, let's cut that sentence in half and say you have to light. Okay, so you have to light, right? Otherwise, if the point is the outcome, you don't need to light. You just need to light the candle to be there, regardless of whether you lit or not. So that seems to be the machloket between the Rabbeinu Tam, other Baalei Tosafot, and the Rambam. So, what does Shulchan Aruch hold? Shulchan Aruch, on the one hand, Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Samech Gimel Seif Bet writes, אחד האנשים ואחד האנשים חייבים להיות בבתיהם נר דלוק בשבת. Who is he quoting?
The Rambam.
Rambam, thank you. Right, the Rambam. That it needs to be lit. He doesn't say you have to light. On the other hand, he does write, לא יקדים למהר להדליקו בעוד היום גדול, שזה לא ניכר שמדליקו לכבוד שבת. Wait, why not? Who said it has to be nikal? Right? Nikal, right? Who says it has to be nikal? Hooray, he says the point is that the light has to be there. If the point is the outcome, so why does it have to be nikal? The Ramah adds over there, so, wait, I didn't. Sorry. So before I answer that, I need to explain one point about the Rambam. Tosfot Rabbeinu Tam mentions Hahus Saba. Hahus Saba says uvilvad shalaktim uvilvad shelo yachel. The Rambam and the Rif. I didn't bring this. I'm very surprised. I brought it over here. That's so strange. Okay. The Rambam and the Rif understand that Hahus Saba is talking about what? Any guesses? Hahus Saba says you can't light too early or too late.
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, thank you. Right? So once again, we're mentioning Hanukkah again. The Rambam and the Rif understand the issue there is Hanukkah, right? You can't light your Hanukkah candle tomorrow at noon. And you also shouldn't light later than when people will see it. And that's right? Because the Gemara there goes from discussing Shabbos candles to discussing Hanukkah. The whole sugya of Hanukkah is there in the middle of the sugya of Shai candle lighting. of Shabbos candles, and then goes back to the sugya of candle of Shabbos candles. And the question is, and so there are a couple of memrot, it's not so clear what are they talking about. Are they talking about Shabbos candles, or are they talking about Hanukkah candles? So there's one example. Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam understand that we're talking about Shabbos candles, and therefore they infer that there's a mitzvah to light, to actively light. Otherwise, we can't say there's a specific time in which you're supposed to light. Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam say, but the Rambam and the Rif say no. Uvad Shalekdim refers to Hanukkah candles. There's nothing to do with Shabbos candles. Why? Because we only need the outcome. Now, Shulchan Aruch says, on the one hand, he says the mitzvah is that the candles will be lit. On the other hand, he says you shouldn't light too early, otherwise it won't be evident that you lit the candles for Shabbat. And the Ramah says, and if you did so, you should actually put the candles out and light them again. So Rabbi Akiva explains that there are two separate things going on here, right? It seems strange, right? Because you have to make up your mind. Shulchan Aruch holding like the Rambam, which is what he seems to be doing over here, or like Rabbeinu Tam, which is what he did over there, right? So Rabbi Akiva says no. We have to read this Rambam, this Shulchan Aruch more carefully. The point isn't you have to have a specific action. The point is that it has to be clear that these candles are fulfilling that chiyuv, that mitzvah. We don't really care what time you light. We don't really care who lit, as long as it's lit for Shabbat. The point is the kavod Shabbat has to have kavana. It has to be evident that was your intention. With just 1 second, I just want to read the Rikeger first. Rikeger says, "Haynu shayad deluk liyan achil, kivan delo yad lekal Shabbat, tzarich lachzor luchabot velachzor veladlika letzorich Shabbat. אבל אם ההדלקה היא לצורך שבת, אלא שהדליק בעוד היום גדול, אין צריך לכבותו. אלא לכתחילה להדליק כל כך מוקדם, שאינו ניכר שמדליקו לכבוד שבת. משמע דמצווה אינה רק שיהיה לו בשבת נר דלוק, אלא דמצוות ההדלקה עצמו לצורך שבת, ולכתחילה ראוי שניכר שההדלקה לכבוד שבת. לפי זה תלוי הכל אם ההדלקה היא לצורך שבת או לא. So Rikeger says at the end, he says that it still doesn't seem to work. In other words, ultimately, it's hard to argue, right? It seems to me he tries to suggest maybe there's no contradiction. Maybe also the Rambam agrees that the candles have to be lit for Shabbat, but it doesn't have to be lit by you for Shabbat. It just has to be lighting for Shabbat. Rabbi Akiva says this doesn't really work because ultimately, when you say the candles have to be lit for Shabbat, let's say a guy comes into your house and lights the candles for you, right? Now that might sound strange, but if you lived in a different time and you had servants or slaves or whatever, right? In a different time, it wouldn't be so strange for the servants, the slaves, whatever, right? And back in older times, in worse times, it wouldn't be so strange for a servant or a slave to come to be in your house and light candles for you. Now, are they lighting for Shabbat? L'chora not, but according to the Rambam, l'chora you're Yotzei anyway, right? So Zerah Kiveger, the Shulchan Aruch, he seems to have trouble resolving this contradiction. Ultimately, it seems since the Shulchan Aruch said you have to light at a specific time, so it's true that the point in Shulchan Aruch is it has to be nikal, be evident that you're lighting for Shabbat, but still nikal what? As be evidence shemadliko lichvod Shabbat. But if the guy already lit up your home, now you have sufficient light. According to the Rambam, it's all good, right? There's no problem, l'chora. So it seems that ultimately Shulchan Aruch does not hold like the Rambam, according to the Rabbi Akiva at least. It does not hold like the Rambam, but holds like Rabbeinu Tam. And he only quoted the Rambam's wording here because it's a convenient and easy quote, but it's a quote. It's not what he holds the halacha. But Rav Baruch has been waiting to say something. Yes.
No, just that if an important part was the actual idea that you need the light, but that a piece of needing the light is the actual hadlaka, and there's a certain amount of kavanah. It's like an importation of the Chanukah issue into the Shabbat issue.
Right.
Because it's not just seeing the light now. Now it's doing something.
Right. Your son used the same analogy 2 weeks ago when he said, "Is it hadlaka mitzvah or hanacha mitzvah?" Right, which is what you're referring to, that you're borrowing the chakira from Hanukkah, and it seems when he says she'ino nikar shemadliko likvod Shabbat, it seems like he's borrowing the concept from Hanukkah that hadlaka mitzvah. Right. Now
I'll have to listen more carefully to Yaakov in the future.
He's definitely someone worth listening to, I can tell you that. But what's interesting is that on Hanukkah, what happens if a terrible gust of wind comes and blows my candles out, right? Tomorrow night, I light my candles in a way that they should be able to light and last half an hour past the Kochavim, for argument's sake. And then a terrible gust of wind comes out of nowhere, out of the east, and puts out my candles. What's the halacha? So we say it depends on that chakira, right? If hadlaka mitzvah, I did my thing, I'm done. If you say hanacha mitzvah, so l'chora, it still needs to be lit. So I'm not going to go into the intricacies of the halacha, but begadol we say that hadlaka mitzvah and I'm done. I did my thing. I'm finished. On Shabbos, it would be harder to say that. Now, of course, on Shabbos you can't light on Shabbos, right? Because the center. But let's say my wife lit 40 minutes before Shabbos, as some women do in Yerushalayim, right? So it's 40 minutes before Shabbos. But I was going to come out of Shabbat yet. 10 minutes later, a terrible gust of wind comes and it blows the candles out. What would we say then? So we'd say, okay, she did the mitzvah of hadlaka, but on the other hand, you need to have light on Shabbat. We didn't fulfill that yet because it's getting dark and there's no light, right? Now, again, nowadays with electricity, I don't know if it's justifiable, but definitely in the old days, if those were the candles you had, I'm not sure you wouldn't be able to make another bracha. I have to think about it, but I'm just thinking, as you say, where our heads are in Hanukkah, and that's why we're thinking about the comparison there. But right, since the Shabbos candles are supposed to be practical, you're supposed to use them. So if they get blown out, l'chora, the mitzvah was not fulfilled. Now here's the opposite nafkamina, right? The Ramah says, based on Rabbeinu Tam, if you have all your lights, right, this takes us back to the Shema Shalakil Chatab we learned at the beginning of the page, right? Page number 2 or 3, right? No, a bit later because we had the Tamim, but right at the beginning we said, Shema Shalakil Chatab said, your house is lit with your electricity, right? You have good lighting all around your home. Good. Put it out. Turn it all off, make a bracha, light the Shabbos candles, and then have the Shabbos clock or one of the kids or whatever turn the lights on again. Why? Otherwise, you have light already, so you don't need that, right? This is very similar to what the Ramah says over here. Right? You have sufficient lighting. Yeah, but you didn't light for Shabbat, so put it out and light again for Shabbat. The Rambam definitely would not say this. He'd say, what would it mean? Why are you creating a need of this mitzvah? The mitzvah is fulfilled. You have light all around the house. The mitzvah is fulfilled. You don't need to make another bracha. Why do that? Right? According to the Rambam, you're creating a need of a bracha unjustifiably. According to the Rambam. So this Ramah is definitely like Rabbeinu Tam. Right? Now I'm asking, what about the opposite nafkamina? Right? I lit the candles 40 minutes before Shabbat, and now the gust of wind came and blew them out. Do I make a bracha again? So on the one hand, according to Rabbeinu Tam, I did the mitzvah of lighting. According to the Rambam, I don't have candles that will be lit on Shabbat. Right? So there would be the opposite of nafkamina, presumably. Right? According to the Rambam, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah yet, so make another bracha. So you tried, but that's always true, right? If I make a bracha on my arba minim, right, and I pick them up, and then I realize that one of my kids was uber chucham and switched my etrog for a lemon, right? I didn't do the mitzvah yet, right? So I go look for the etrog, go strangle my kid, and then stop. I go, right, find my etrog, find my etrog, and now I'll make another bracha, right? Because I didn't do I tried doing the mitzvah the first time, I just didn't manage. So I'll make the bracha again. You say, bracha levatala. No, I try, and it's other happens, anus. But I'll definitely make the bracha again. Just because I made the bracha before doesn't nullify my current bracha, because now I'm doing the mitzvah now, not earlier, right? Presumably, the same thing would be said over here, according to the Rambam, right? I lit the Shabbos candles early, and then they went out. So you have to make another bracha because you didn't do the mitzvah yet, because the mitzvah is the daluk, and that just hasn't happened yet. According to Rabbeinu Tam, if the mitzvah is specific action, you could argue, right, as we said over here, on page 8, it said if the mitzvah is specific action, then l'chora I did that already, although according to him, he probably does agree that if you lit early, but the candles aren't actually lit, so you didn't fulfill all the full obligation. So that's just a bit of a pilpul about the hadlakasa mitzvah or hanachasa mitzvah, or right, the action or the outcome. I just wanted to say that the Rambam definitely holds outcome. Rabbeinu Tam, I think Rabbeinu Tam holds also action, but not only. So not only the action. Ultimately, if you don't have candles lit, you have a problem. Now, the nafkamina in the old days was with nafkamina the Magen Avraham brings over here. Katav Maharash b'shem Maharam. Right, in the old days, and this maybe I'll say a word about the historical background. In the old days, you weren't able to go to the store and to the butcher every day of the week and discover that another 10,000 chickens were butchered yesterday in the country. It didn't work like that, right? You had your own farms, you had your own, so resources were more limited. So weddings, if you think weddings are expensive now, it's true, but the weddings used to be expensive differently in the old days, and it was just something that was out of the ordinary. So what they do is, to cut costs, they get married on Fridays, and then have the Seudat mitzvah, the Chatan Lekala, is the Seudat Leil Shabbat. The way you consolidate the two, right? You have to make a big Seudat for Shabbos anyway, so you make a much bigger Seudat for the wedding, but at least you've cut some costs. The problem is, what is everyone going to do with candle lighting at home? Because people, if you go to chuppah on Friday these days, usually you'd come home a few hours before Shabbat, but they purposely have the chuppah late. So, katav ma'arash b'shem Maharam, sheyesh chuppah be'erev Shabbat u'machrim ba'ad achar shkiat hachama. Right, they purposely had the chuppah go into shkia. That was kind of the point, and then they can daven and eat. Right. V'isha ina rotza lekabel Shabbat lifnei chuppah. Right, so you say, okay, so have early Shabbos and then go to the chuppah. But I don't want to. I want to be able to do things. I want to be able to carry. I want to be able to write. I don't know, whatever. I want to be able to do things. I don't want to make Shabbat, early Shabbat. As tadlik haner bilo bracha kodem chuppah, ואחר כך בחשיכה תפרוס ידה על הנרות ותברך. One option. או תאמר לגוי להדליק אחר החופה והיא תברך. So the תפרוס ידה על הנרות is an astonishing thing. But also, Tomar legoda likachar chuppah v'yitevarech is also an astonishing thing. So, let's start from the second one. What's going on here with the goy, right? The goy in this case is being her shaliach. You'll say shlichus doesn't work by a goy, right? Shlichus only works as only a Jew can do a mitzvah for you, right? But here it's what the Ketzot calls ma'aseh be'alma, meaning we need. There are two kinds of shlichuyot, right? In the world of shlichut, there's shlichut where someone is doing an active mitzvah, and I need a Jew to do the mitzvah. Otherwise, right? You take Trumas HaMaasros, right? I need a Jew to take the Trumas HaMaasros. A guy can't take Trumas HaMaasros; it doesn't work. So I tell the guy, do it for me. It doesn't work because he doesn't have the world of Trumas HaMaasrot. But here, the point is the outcome. So, is there any difference between lighting the candle with a longer stick or telling a guy to light the candles for me? It's the same thing. The point is, I did what it took to light the candles. Now, there are two ways of reading this. One is I need the outcome, so I tell the guy, light the candles, and I'm making a bracha on the fact that I created the outcome. One way of reading it. Another way of reading it is I'm lighting these candles now vicariously through the guy, but I'm still the one who's lighting the candles. I'm considered the one who caused these candles to be lit right now. It's no different from pressing the light switch. I can press the light switch, and then before I press the light switch, I make the bracha, right, as we saw in the Tzitzirezer last time. Or I can tell the guy to light the candles for me. Either way, I'm causing something else to create the light in my home. And that action is what I'm making a bracha on.
That sounds harder, the second option, because it's nice to say masekov, but here there's actually a human being, or what the Gemara would call like dat acheret. Like it's hard to. I can understand saying that it's that. I can understand that it's mitzvah b'totzah. That makes more sense, and the goy is facilitating that. But to say that his act becomes my act, that when there's no shlichut, that sounds harder, no?
Yeah, I hear. You're saying the light switch isn't asking me how do I want the lights to go. It's just physics.
Right. There's a diyun about machine matzahs that's like that, where it could be that machine matzahs are, some people wanted to compare it, I think, to having like children make matzah or whatever, but there's dafka, right, there's something that could be better about the machine matzah, which is that there's not another person's inferior kavanah interfering. Right.
Nachon. You're saying here the goy can have his own kavanot. So I was thinking of comparing it to a few places in halacha where we have gadol omed al gabav, or by a goy can also do things as long as am omed al gabav, meaning we see that I could be considered the one who's causing it. You are right that by shechita, for example, if I remember correctly, the Gemara in Chulin does propose that the amidah al gabei hagoy will work, and then says no, because you never know what the goy is thinking, which I think is exactly your point, right? So that works, right? That works if it really is something that's automatic. So if I say the point is I need the outcome, so besides so heal it, eyelet, who cares? Who cares as long as I get the outcome?
Yeah, we also don't see that it doesn't seem like the nisuach here is like she should tell him to light candles lichvod Shabbat or something.
Right, but I'll tell you the problem. Why do I tend dafka to the other havana? Because of the hitavarech, which I find very interesting. If the point is just the outcome, how does she make the bracha? Now,
maybe she can make a bracha on causing the outcome, similar to what you could go connect that to what the Tosfot said before. It could be that yinachinami, that the mitzvah is on the out.
And the question also is what bracha would she make? You can't say lahadlik. She could say ahadlakat ner, but she wouldn't say lahadlik ner.
Ahadlakat ner Shabbat.
Yes. That's if it's a mitzvah b'totzah, then that should be the bracha.
Right. I mentioned earlier, as you said, the Tosfot say about Tosfot, a different Tosfot. No, Tosfot said earlier. Sorry, Tosfot said earlier. Compared this to Brit Milah. The Rambam about Brit Milah says that when the father does the bread, this is based on the Gemara in Psachim. It seems to be Pshat Gemara in Psachim that when the father does the Brit Milah, he says Lamula Tabin. If someone else does, the bracha makes is Al Brit Milah. Many Achronim understand. How does it go? Alamilah. Sorry, Alamilah, as opposed to Lamula Tabin. Many Achronim understand that the father's mitzvah is to actually do the actual bris, to actually cut, as opposed to if the father is faint-hearted and can't do it himself, so he gives up on that aspect of the mitzvah. But it's not that he's doing the mitzvah vicariously; he's given up on doing it. He hasn't done it, right? Big machloket there, big shach and k'tzot. I'm not going to go into all that now, obviously, but just what Rabbi Yoel said reminded me, right, of the similar idea here. Tosfot said, but you'll know Tosfot's point here in this middle paragraph, right? He said, if the wind came, if a gust of wind came and covered the blood for me, I don't make a bracha. I'm patur from the mitzvah. I was yotze covering, even though I didn't do the mitzvah, and I don't make a bracha either, right? If I do it myself, despite that, if I do it myself, I will make a bracha, right? So if it continues Tosfos logic, this part, right, in this paragraph, I'd say the goy could motzi my need of having light, and yet when I light myself, I make a bracha, right? I'll say, as Rabbi Yol said, Ladlik Nosal Shabbat. But if the goy is doing it, I'd say, right? I'd say Ladlik Nosal Shabbat, and if a goy is doing it, I won't make a bracha at all, even though I do fulfill the mitzvah, like a gust of wind, right? But that's fine because the first part of the Magen Avraham is worse. It's all good. It doesn't. None of this really matters because the Magen Avraham says something more surprising over here. He says, "Come in, close your eyes." Right? It's like, right. I'm thinking of my 3-year-old son who always he comes back with some prize he got and he's holding it and he says, "Abba, close your eyes." He says, "Now look." He says, "Look, wow!" Right? Say same thing here, right? You come in and the house is lit, so you quickly close your eyes and they say, "Wow, it's lit!" Right? Now we're going to enjoy this, right? Magen Avraham says this is very strange. What is this? Well, why are you making a bracha if it's lit already? The bracha is on the hana. What's going on here, right? It seems like he's saying, like the Maharam is saying, the bracha is on the hana, right? The pleasure I get, the benefit I get out of it. That's why you have to close your eyes, not benefit from it for a minute, and then, right? So,
I actually thought that the fact that he uses the word lifros makes me think that maybe he's hinting at like pores mapa u'mekadesh, kind of like I turned something that was not lichvod Shabbat. Now I pause, and now it's lichvod Shabbat.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Yefeh. So I wanted to show there's a Shulchan Aruch Harav and there's a Har Tzvi, and I think they say two slightly different things. When I was looking over this before, I realized that I presented it here as if they're just continuing each other, but I think they're saying things that are slightly different, which I found interesting. So let's see. Says Shulchan Aruch Harav, Mikol makom b'diavad sheshachcha v'lo idlika kodem ben hashmashot v'nizkera ben hashmashot yesh להתיר לה לצוות לגוי להדליק ושתברך היא קודם שתהנה לאורן. וכיוון שעיקר מצוות הדלקת נר שבת אינה הדלקה בלבד אלא ההנאה והתשמיש לאורה היא עיקר המצווה, אלא שההדלקה היא התחלה והכנה למצווה זו, לכן מברכים עליה, וזו ששכחה ולא בירכה בתחילת המצווה יכולה לברך קודם עיקר המצווה, then קודם שתהנה לאורן. So he seems to understand the way we said about the prisa, right, the prisa of your hands, meaning the mitzvah, we think of the mitzvah of candle lighting as doing the action of lighting the candles, right? Well, wrong. Why? Because the mitzvah is to respect and honor and gain pleasure on Shabbat from these candles, right? To honor Shabbat and to gain pleasure ourselves from these candles. And that you do throughout Shabbat, throughout the evening. So you should make a bracha when you start. But if you didn't, then you could make it later. You could make a bracha on Shabbat, lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. You're not to madlik ner on Shabbos. Lo mishaneh. Doesn't matter. You could make a bracha of lahadlik ner because you're fulfilling Chazal's takana by appreciating, enjoying, gaining pleasure from the candles on Shabbat, right? Just like, right, we have this halacha by tefillin, right? If for whatever reason a person puts his tefillin on without a bracha, so he says, as long as the tefillin are on him, he can still make a bracha, because the bracha isn't really on the act of putting the tefillin on. It's on having the tefillin on you. You should do it when you're putting them on. First of all, because that's where you start, but also because that's when you're paying more attention to them, right? Because you're in the middle of tying them, right? And therefore you should make a bracha then. But if you don't, you could make a bracha later on, as long as you're wearing them, because the bracha really is wearing them. So he says, the mitzvah, he extends this idea beyond just the question. In other words, right? The way I presented Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam earlier was, Rabbeinu Tam says the mitzvah is to do the act of lighting the candle. The Rambam says the mitzvah is when Shabbat starts, candles should be lit, right? And he says, no, that's not, neither of those is right? The Rambam, that's not the Rambam means either. The Rambam means you have to have a candle from which you're benefiting throughout the evening. And that's the mitzvah. So the mitzvah is a continuous mitzvah. You usually start a half an hour before Shabbat and goes in at 3-4 hours into Shabbat. But the mitzvah is having the candles there to enjoy and enjoying them. So that's what the Shulchan Aruch Harav says. Rabbi Veger points out this point about the goy, what I mentioned earlier about the goy. Alidach takanad letomar legoy laadlik kasher, kevan den shlichut legoy hi ina medleket vech tevarech. Right? We mentioned this earlier. It says the Har Tzvi, lefi ha'amur, הדלקת נר של שבת, אין מצוותה עצם ההדלקה, שיהיה עיכוב בדבר שיהיה מדליק בידיים דווקא. עיקר מצווה השתדלות שיהיה נר דלוק, ויהיה אור מאיר בבית, וזהו קיום מצוותה. לכן אף על פי שהגוי מדליק, בכל מקום, מכיוון שהוא על פי דיבורה והשתדלותה, מקיים את המצווה בזה, ושפיר מברכת על זה שהודלק על ידה. So, I think these are, I just wanted to point out that I think that the Shulchan Aruch Harav and the Har Tzvi, they're reading the Rambam differently, right? Har Tzvi is saying, the mitzvah is like the way we usually think about, right? What is the mitzvah? And I'll just the same comparison we made before, and it's Tosfot's fault, because Tosfot mentioned Brit Milah, so I have Brit Milah in my head. It's Hanukkah tomorrow night, so we're thinking of Hanukkah, but also I have Brit Milah in my head, on my mind because of Tosfot. So, the way we usually think about the father's mitzvah, right? The Gemara in Kedushin in Daf Kaftet says that it's a mitzvah, the father's mitzvah to do the bris, shene'emar vayamol Avraham et Yitzchak beno, right? What is the father's mitzvah? Usually we think of the father's mitzvah as the mitzvah is to order a hall, to bring a mohel, to bring the catering, right? To invite the chevra, right? Make sure there's a minyan, whatever, right? Corona times, maybe it's slightly different, but right. The point is to create the scenario, to create what needs to be done, all the background needs that to make sure that a whole bunch of things, to create the context in which the child will be mahul, the child will undergo a bris. That's the father's mitzvah, right? Now, as I mentioned before, the big machod rishon, the big machod achronim is the father's mitzvah to actually cut or to do that. But the way we usually think about it is the father's mitzvah is to create the context that will end up with a child mahul. And the Har Tzvi reads the Rambam here the same. The Har Tzvi says the mitzvah is to do whatever it takes for the house to be lit, right? That's what and therefore, when you tell the guy to do it for you, you did what needed to be done for the house to be lit, and you're making a bracha on that, no problem. I think Shulchan Aruch Harav says slightly different, right? Shulchan Aruch Harav says no, the mitzvah is the pleasure, and therefore it's not the mitzvah isn't the creating the context. The mitzvah is benefiting from the light, having kavod ועונג, as we said before. That is the mitzvah. Right, so they're defining the mitzvah differently. So just to sum this up, just what we came out with is the way I see it. Rabbeinu Tam says the mitzvah is the action. The Rabbeinu Tam says that there is a mitzvah to actually light. For example, if you already have light in your house, so extinguish it and light again, make a bracha, right? And therefore he says you should make a bracha. And the Rama actually says this is Rabbeinu Tam lahalacha. But we see that the Ashkenazi minhag, presumably more based on the Rambam, is to say that you need to have candles lit, and therefore a goy could light for you, or you could light before and just then have the kavanah to change the candles into Shabbos candles. How does that work? Two ways of thinking about it. One way is Shulchan Aruch Harav, who says the mitzvah is gaining the benefits, right? Benefiting from the candles, getting the pleasure from the candles. And the other is the Har Tzvi, who says that the mitzvah is to make sure there is light. Whatever it takes to make sure there is light.